in the last section, we added a bunch of code to our login form, all revolving around state and this mystery property in here that we called text. So I'm going to pull up a diagram now, and we're going to give a shot at trying to figure out what the heck is going on here with this thing. So here's our diagram. So this diagram is meant to represent a cycle of sorts. So we're going to start off at the top left-hand side. We're going to go down, and we're going to come back up to the top. Okay. So everything starts off with a text input. We rendered it to our inside of our component. It shows up on the screen, and it's just kind of there. Once it is rendered and it's visible on the screen, the text input just sits there, and it doesn't actually do anything until a user actually taps in it and then starts to enter some text. So until a user enters some text, the text input is just sitting there. Now when a user enters some text, some really interesting stuff starts to happen. Whenever the user enters text, that onChangeText event handler is called. So we added a prop to that text input of onChangeText, and we passed it a function. That function gets called whenever a user types something into that input, okay? And it gets called with the text that the user just added. So that's not the weirdest thing in the world, right? We added a callback function. This fat arrow function right here is going to be called whenever a user types inside that thing, and it gets called with the text that the user added. So then, after that onChangeText event is called, we immediately call setState with the new text. Okay, so we take that text and we call setState with it. So now the current value of that text input, like as far as the user is concerned, as far as we're concerned, is this.state.text. That is what the value of the input is. Next, because we called setState, the component immediately re-renders. Don't forget that step. Whenever we call setState, the component immediately re-renders. And now here's where the magic happens. When the text input re-renders, right? Like when our render method is executed again, the text input is created again, and when it re-renders, we tell it that its value should be equal to this.state.text. So we recreate the text input, we place it on the screen, and we immediately tell it that its value is this.state.text. And so we start off all the way with the cycle again, all the way back up to the top with the text input. So the very critical part here, the really important part, is that whenever a user enters some text into that input, the text input is not responsible for knowing what its value is. It has no idea what its value is. Instead, we save the value that the user entered to this.state, and then whenever the text input re-renders, we say, hey, text input, you're not going to tell us what your value is. You have no idea what your value is. We are going to tell you very distinctly your value, the text you should contain should be coming from this.state.text. Okay, so I know this might seem like a really crazy town way of handling text input. I don't disagree with you. To be honest, it's very much dissimilar from how just about every other JavaScript framework does this, right? Every other JavaScript framework says, let's put a text input on the screen. When the user types something in, great, just let them do it. And then eventually when the user tries to submit the form, let's reach into the text input and pull the value out. So React Native is completely different in that regard. We are not letting the text exist inside the text input. The text exists as a piece of state on our component. That's how it works. The benefit to this is that we always know exactly what the value of that text input is. We can just reference this.state.text. And now maybe that doesn't sound like the greatest benefit in the world, but believe me, as soon as we start to try to pull the text out of this thing and try to make this into a reusable component, blah, 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 all these benefits are going to come together, and you're going to realize that holding text outside of the text input actually has a fair number of benefits. Okay, so this has been kind of a heavy little discussion talking about how these text inputs work. So let's take a quick break and then come back and turn this text input right here into a reusable component.